My dressing, my choice is something we heard people say very clearly, implying that women have a choice. It was more of women. My dress, my choice. The question we would like to deal with, is it really true? For you as a Christian, is your dress your choice? What do the scriptures say about this subject? It's something that we need to deal with ourselves as we deal with this issue of dressing. Why do we dress? What does the Bible say about it? You know, I wrote a book called Finding a Life Partner. And again, some young people were very uncomfortable with the word finding. Says, no, I want to choose. Why are you not calling it choosing a life partner? And I explained to them that the day you become a Christian, you make a choice of Christ. And when you make a choice of Christ, He comes as the Lord of your life. What does that mean? From then onwards, you have accepted, deliberately chosen to be dictated to by God. So that what you think, what you say, what you do, all of it, from the moment you are born again, is now dictated by God. You live your life to honor God. Isn't that why Paul is saying, for me to live is Christ, to die is gain, but to live is Christ. The reason I'm alive is because of Christ. The life I now live, I live by the Son of God, Paul continues to say. So it means that it's not just a question of dressing, the choice of careers. We need to seek God and say, God, which career do you want me to enter into? The choice of houses. God, where do you want me to live? Because of the where you live in that neighborhood, God is likely to be sending you there to do ministry. Where do you want me to be? Who do you want me to marry? Why? Because who I marry may be a sign of showing me the direction He wants me to witness and to live for Him. So my dress, my choice, is okay for non-Christians. After all, they live by themselves. They choose what they do. They don't live to honor God, and it doesn't bother them. But when you become a Christian, you can't really say, my dress, my choice. My choice is Christ, and the moment you choose Christ, it then means that you have to accept, to seek His mind on what you should wear. Because what you should wear should actually honor Him. Just listen to what He says in 1 Timothy chapter 2, verse 9. He says, I also want the women to dress modestly, with decency and propriety, adorning themselves not with elaborate hairstyles or gold or pearls or expensive clothing. Here, Paul is telling women, I guess that also applies to men, that they are to dress to show modesty. I want women to dress modestly. So you can't dress in a way that I cannot fulfill this requirement of modesty. And I'm sure you have seen people who don't dress modestly. Now, the moment they don't dress modestly, it means that they are using their clothing maybe to call attention, so that everybody has to keep turning to look at, who is that? How can you allow your daughter to dress like that? What's wrong? Who are they? Can you imagine the surprise if they turn out to be the ones preaching in the marketplace? After everybody has thought there must be something wrong with them. He is saying, wear modestly. And what is modest? Is something that will not shout to outsiders and point to you rather than to God. Modestly. The words that are used here is as, I want women to dress modestly. So you must ask yourself, what I'm dressing. It's not, you don't dress whatever you want. It's not my dress, my choice. I dress in a way that can be regarded as modest. The other word used by Paul is with decency. In other words, there are dresses that are not decent. And we know about that. Every culture has what is called decent. Okay, if you are in the northern Kenya, among the Turkana traditionally, they may not cover very much. But there is that which if you don't cover, even that hot place, there is a minimum. If you don't cover it, they'll regard you as decent. I do agree that this word modest and decency may have also something to do with your cultural norms. But you must ask yourself, the people I want to win to the Lord, do they see me as decent the way I'm dressed today? The third word he used here is propriety. With decency and propriety, is it really appropriate? Is you dressing appropriate for the weather? So, propriety, you are not in gumboots in the sun, in the heat of the sun. So you need to adorn yourself. To achieve that, Paul goes on to say, you should not be having shouting like hairstyles, elaborate hairstyles of all kinds of things that attract people to you rather than to point people to God. And then he goes on to say, even the idea of breaking the bank to come and so that you are new and every thief is wondering where they can corner you because you are full of gold, exhibiting gold and piles, and the clothes are such that somebody wants to take them out of you to go and sell them. He's saying that is not right. That's not modesty. He explains modesty will mean your hairstyle is not shouting. It will mean you do not use your wealth on your body, gold and pearls, and your dresses are reasonably priced, not something that makes everybody want to wish they could steal your clothes. That's what he's saying. So you can see clearly, Paul does ask the question, can a Christian say, my dress, my choice? Paul's answer in 1 Timothy 2:9 is clearly not so. No. You don't have the freedom to dress in whichever way you want. But of course, when you say he has told you to dress modestly, it means you can still dress very well, attractively. When he says you dress with decency, it just means you can dress very, very well. So he's not suggesting it's wrong to be smart. I think my understanding of this is he is saying it's not right for you to wear your wealth on your clothing and for you to have such way of dressing that people's attention on you, even if you are a preacher or somebody who wants to point people to God. But maybe you should go back to Genesis chapter 3, where we read of clothing initially. Verse 10 says, he answered, I had you in the garden and I was afraid because I was naked. So I hid. That's the beginning of dressing. The moment Adam fell in the garden, and Adam and Eve fell in the Garden of Eden into sin, the one thing they knew immediately is they were naked. And so they could not agree to be seen by God. And so they hid. What they are saying, they hid. So dressing came as a way of dealing with the sin. I've never quite understood exactly how this is, but maybe one of the things is that before the fall of man, even if a woman dressed with nothing, like of course Eve must have, it could not bring bad ideas on Adam. Even if Adam walked stark naked, it could not bring immoral ideas on Eve. But the moment men fell, it now meant that there are certain things that you could not just do without covering yourself. So covering came because of sin. And it means you need to be aware of this. That's why as a woman, you must wear in such a way that you do not tempt men by the way you dress. You must cover appropriately because that's why we dress. The reason dress came is to cover nakedness or whatever that your culture regards as nakedness. And from what we read, it sounds like the most important parts are the private, what what every culture calls the private parts. There isn't any culture known which does not regard the men's and the women's private parts as critical to cover. So you are not free to dress the way you want, because you cannot dress and show nakedness. Because right from the beginning, clothing came because of sin, and you do not want the way you are dressed as a man to make women start thinking of immoral ideas. You do not want, as a woman, to dress in such a way that you make men have wrong ideas. Obviously, even if you are fully covered, the devil can still tempt. But at least you'll not have been the contributor. There will be no contributory negligence in causing the other person, especially people of the opposite sex, to end up with immoral ideas. Remember, even if they don't rape you, don't end up sleeping with you, the fact that wrong ideas have come, Jesus called it sin. When you think of a woman lustfully, you have already committed sin. So you can't just choose to be naked. You cannot choose to wear and reveal what should be covered, not when you want to follow the scriptures. Then in 2 Timothy chapter 4, verse 13, we read, when you come, Timothy being told by Paul, bring the cloak that I left with Carpus at Troas and my scrolls, especially the parchments. What is Paul saying? The weather is winter. Come before winter. Why? I left my warm clothing for winter. I think at Ephesus. He has said at Carpus that I left with the Carpus at Troas. Yeah, the place is Troas. And he is saying it's going to be cold. Why do we dress? In order to deal with the cold. As a friend of mine used to say that heat is very difficult to handle, because if it gets hot, you remove your coat. It gets hotter, you remove your shirt. It gets hotter, there's a place it reaches, you just have to survive the heat. But cold is easier to handle, because if it's cold, you add a shirt. If it's colder, you put a coat. If it's even colder, you get a warm blanket around you. You can deal with the cold. So why do we use dresses? Why do we dress? In order to protect ourselves from getting pneumonia or getting colds. And it's important. So, my dress, my choice? No. The other things that influence the dress you wear that morning, the temperature around you, will be a critical thing to choose as to what to wear. It's not my dress, my choice. The atmosphere, the people around you, are having to influence how you dress. And that's an important thing to know. Then we go to the book of Esther, chapter 4, verse 4. Here we read, when Esther's eunuchs and female attendants came and told her about Mordecai. Mordecai was the uncle who was now in mourning, and therefore were in sackcloth. She was in great distress. She sent clothes to him to put on instead of his sackcloth, but he would not accept them. What are we learning here? You wear clothes to share the message. Like now, Mordecai wanted people to know that he is in mourning, he is in pain for the decree that all Jews were going to be killed. He is wearing to demonstrate to everyone that he is in pain, he is in mourning. But he's also demonstrating to God. This is the way the culture of the Jews were. He is wearing to demonstrate to God that he literally is humbling himself, seeking God's intervention, so the Jews, himself and the Jews, are not going to die. So you can wear in such a way that you show humility. Using your clothes, people can tell that you want to dedicate humility. And that hasn't changed. So your clothes are telling a story. So you can't just wear anyhow. There's a way you wear, and I start thinking, that girl is available for sex. Maybe I should approach her simply because she was wearing like a prostitute. There's a way of wearing that suggests you could be a prophet. It might turn out you are not, but the people around you will think you're a prostitute. My sister, if you're a Christian, how would you want people to mistake you for a prostitute? So your clothes are telling a story. And to be important that now if you go for a wedding, again there's a way you can wear that indicating like you are attending a funeral in your culture. There's a way to wear in a wedding in order to indicate to the bride and the bridegroom that you truly would want them to you are rejoicing with them. You know, Romans 12 says that rejoice with those who rejoice and mourn with those who mourn, or cry with those who cry. It means your clothing should also tell the same story. If you're in mourning, there's a way of dressing. If you're in rejoicing, there's a way of doing it. So there's a way you dress to go to a funeral, and there's a way you dress to go to a wedding, because the clothing do tell a story. So Mordecai knew he can indicate, and sure enough, the message reached the cousin, the rich Esther. Oh, your uncle, the gate, look, this is what they are doing. And she got a message. She wondered what could have happened to him. What is it? And actually it communicated, because that way he was able to tell her exactly what had happened. And she seemed not to know by that time. So it's important to understand the way you dress can tell a message. People may take you as somebody who is likely to help them just by the way you are dressed. And it's important. That's why, for example, if you really want to witness to non-Christians, you don't go to them wearing the dog collar that the pastors wear. Because if you do, then everybody will be on their defense right from the beginning. If you really just want to witness and discuss, begin a discussion, rather than not about your clothing, then you will go to them wearing just like them, so they cannot start from far starting to create a defense for themselves. You want to talk to them about the issues of life, then tilt the topic to the need of their soul. So what you wear could either encourage you to win them over to Christ, or could make them defensive just by the way you wear. Mordecai communicated using the clothing. And the same thing happens here to today. The way you dress will help people around you to know what you want them to know, or to make assumptions about you. And it will either make it easier for you to share the gospel with them, or make it more difficult for you to share the gospel with them. It's critical how you dress. So it's not my dress, my choice. It is, how will my dress help communicate that I love these people? How will it help to communicate that Christ loves them and cares about them? How can my dress help me in my mission to do kingdom, to build God's kingdom? Then in Mark chapter 5, verse 15, we read, when they came to Jesus, they saw the man who had been possessed by the legion of demons, sitting there, dressed and in his right mind, and they were afraid. So, how you dress can tell whether you are still mad or not. These are people, you knew him as a madman, badly dressed, more naked than covered, cutting himself, tearing his clothes. Then when Jesus healed him, he dressed differently. He said the dressing, in fact, he said dressed and in his right mind. And they were afraid. Wow, this man has done a miracle. This guy has been terrible, violent. Now look, he is now just like one of us. So it's not my dress, my choice. The way you dress could easily indicate that you are mad, that you are depressed, that you need a psychiatrist, rather than you are trying to help me to know Christ. No, I think I need to help you to go to to the psychiatric hospital just by the way you dress. So dressing is also an indication of sanity. It's an indication of madness or sanity. And so if you really want me to think you are mad, there's a way you will dress, and I'll treat you like a mad person. If you want me to know you are okay, we can talk, and that you are in your right mind, we can have a good fellowship, there's a way of you dress again, and it will help me to know that. So, this story of the demoniac clearly helps us to know that dressing does indicate sanity. That when Jesus, as a proof that Jesus had actually healed a guy, he now dressed differently. Let me ask you, the way you dress, do people mistake you for a mad person? Do they mistake you for a drug addict? Do they mistake you for an alcoholic? Is that what you'd want them to have? And yet you still want to win them to Christ? Surely you cannot say my life belongs to God, that for me to live is Christ. In other words, I'm living to bring glory to Christ. I'm living in order to preach Christ. I'm living in order to draw people to Christ. And then you start thinking that you can wear whichever way you want. It will not quite work. And I think that's something that you need to deal with. Then in 1 Peter 3, 1-5, we read, "Wives, in the same way submit yourself to your own husbands, so that if any of them do not believe the word, they may be won over without words by the behavior of their wives, when they see the purity and reverence of your lives." Verse 3, "Your beauty should not come from outward adornment, such as elaborate hairstyles again, and the wearing of gold jewelry or fine clothing. Rather, it should be that of your inner self, the unfading beauty of a gentle and quiet spirit, which is of great worth in God's sight. For this is the way the holy women of the past, who put their hopes in God, used to adorn themselves. They submitted themselves to their own husbands." In other words, Paul is saying clothes can show inner beauty. The way you dress might suggest to me how you are. And he is saying, do not think that the way you dress outside is enough. No. Your dressing, verse 4 is saying, should show your inner self, the unfading beauty of a gentle and quiet spirit. So, here, the Bible is actually saying how you clothe yourself, even if you are well dressed, is not enough. You have to go beyond dressing to showing this life he is describing as somebody of unfading beauty, of a gentle and quiet spirit. You may be very well dressed, very decent, but the way your mouth is operating shows somebody who could be mad, somebody who could be violent. So in the end, we are not seeing what you are dressing. The dress attracted us to see somebody who could help us, but now that is changing. So we're being told, no, it's not my dress, my choice. You need to combine your dress and your spirit to be speaking the same message. Then Matthew chapter 6 verse 28 says, "And why do you worry about clothes? See how the flowers of the field grow. They do not labor or spin. Yet I tell you that not even Solomon in all his splendor was dressed like one of these." God wants us to know that he is the provider of clothing. Clothing is a necessity, so you can rest assured God will give you clothing. And he is saying he'll dress you well, just like he dresses the lilies of the field. They are not that important, not compared with human beings. So how will he clothe the lilies of the field and forget to clothe you as his child? So he's promising to give you clothes. They may not be necessarily expensive. After all, he has said you should not be wearing expensively, but it will fully cover your nakedness and make you decent. Then in Matthew chapter 7, verse 15, we read, "Watch out for false prophets. They come to you in sheep's clothing, but inwardly they are ferocious wolves." Another warning. that do not be deceived by the way people dress. People can dress very well until you think they are one. He's one of you. The sheep was that thing. This is another sheep. But yet, it was not another sheep. It was a ravenous wolf that came in stealthily into with the other sheep, only to turn around and start eating the sheep. So it's not enough. It's not my dress, my choice. I think here the emphasis is still that your dressing and your spirit must have the same thing. But I think we are also getting warning. Do not somebody said, do not judge a book by its cover. Don't just look at the dressing and give up on people. Don't look at the dressing and start trusting people without questions. No. Here we are learning somebody could be somebody who is a wolf. Somebody you should be worried about. But he is coming like a Christian, looking very sanctimonious, looking holy. And yet the truth is, he intends to destroy you spiritually and physically. He may even be wanting to steal from you. So be careful. Don't just look at clothing. Be careful. We are learning. Then in Luke chapter 16, verse 19, we read the story of the rich man and Lazarus. There was a rich man who was dressed in purple and fine linen and lived in luxury every day. What do we learn from this story? That the clothing you have do not indicate your destiny, your eternal destiny. Here was the rich man, well dressed, fine clothing, purple, fine linen. But in hell, he is suffering, in hell, being burned. Here was Lazarus, who was cheap because of being poor. He was of this right mind, but he was poor, so he could not dress expensively. But in heaven, he is at the bosom of Abraham. So do not start thinking that your clothing will determine your spiritual destiny. The only way they can influence is if you are wearing as a way of rebelling against God's instructions. Then obviously you have chosen your destiny. The clothing is not what is the problem. It is that by deciding to wear those clothes, you have decided against God. The clothing themselves are not the determinant of your spiritual destiny. It is, are you wearing to demonstrate rebellion against God? Then you have chosen your eternal destiny. Deuteronomy 22 verse 5 gives a warning. It says, a woman must not wear men's clothing, nor a man wear women's clothing, for the Lord your God detests anyone who does this. My dress, my choice? No. If you're a woman, God created you a woman, you must be proud to be a woman, and your clothing should shout from far, this is a woman coming. You have no freedom to wear like a man. And men have no freedom to wear like women. God created you a man, he created male and female, because he wanted them to show and be proud of the way he has created you. Finally, Isaiah 3:16-24 says, the Lord says, the women of Zion are haughty, walking along with outstretched necks, flirting with their eyes, strutting along with swaying hips, with ornaments giggling on their ankles. Therefore the Lord will bring sores on the heads of the women of Zion. The Lord will make their scalps bowed. In that day, the Lord will snatch away their finery, the bangles and the headbands and crescent necklaces, the earrings and bracelets, the headdresses and anklets and sashes and perfume bottles and charms, the signet rings and rose rings, the fine globes and capes and cloaks, the purses and mirrors and the linen garments and tiaras and shows. Instead of fragrance, there will be stench. Instead of such, a rope. Instead of well-dressed hair, boldness. Instead of fine clothing, sackcloth. Instead of beauty, branding. In other words, God is saying, by that way of trying to walk proud and rebellious from God, invites him to a punishment where he affects you, both in this life and the next life. Like you thought you can wear your hair anyway. He ends up making your head bowed. May the Lord teach us that our dressing are of interest to him.